A few weeks ago, our popular segment, Chit Chat with Manoj, featured an interesting doctor from our community by the name of Dr. Shehzad Rehman. People loved that conversation, and so, by popular demand, today, Dr. Rehman returns to the sets of Chit Chat with Manoj. Let's lend our ears to this dialogue.
Welcome to Chit Chat with Manoj. I'm Manoj Singh. Hello, Adab, Namaste. Today we are going to talk about a very important topic, depression. And I would like, if possible, that your whole family should be watching this episode. And I'm so happy and that Dr. Shehzad Rehman, welcome to the show, could take some time and come and be with us for this important topic discussion. Shehzad graduated from the Patna Medical College. Thereafter, he was with the Brown University, where he specialized in psychiatry. He was even the faculty member for 20 years, and then he moved to George Washington University. So, Shehzad, tell us now what you're doing and what your specialization is.
Actually, I'm a psychopharmacologist, which means medical school followed by 4 years of training in psychiatry and then subsequently psychiatric research. So my main work currently is actually developing new drugs for psychiatric conditions like depression, insomnia, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, even some Alzheimer's medication, anxiety disorder, etc. And then I have a small practice with some therapists as a small clinical practice in Arlington. But
that's nice. So let's, for the audience, let's start with the basic. What is depression?
Depression is essentially one of the commonest medical conditions. According to World Health Organization, that is the #1 reason for disability, above heart disease and gastroenterological condition, etc. So it causes a lot of disability, and as well as so what we call morbidity, as well as mortality. There are 40,000 suicides per year in this country and 1 million suicides per year worldwide, making it the 4th killer of mankind. And we have all this gun shooting and things that we hear about, and a lot of lawmakers are talking about mental health and things. So if we haven't even taken those into account, but I'm just talking about the very crude data of suicide. So if you just look at it as a tip of the iceberg, it's a very common, deadly, and disabling condition. And it's argued that almost 2/3 of the people will go through a major depression at one point or another. It's different from feeling sad. When you say that I'm feeling depressed about something or whatever, first of all, you have to feel it persistently for 2 weeks or so. Secondly, it also has a number of symptoms, feeling sad or crying, a word anhedonia, which is often used by psychiatrists, which means lack of capacity to enjoy. If you read books, you stop reading books. If you enjoyed theater, you stop going to theater. And then it causes disability. So in other words, you have to meet not only the symptoms criteria of depression, sleep disorder, fatigue, poor concentration, suicidal thoughts, etc., but it also has to sort of interfere somehow either with your job or with your social functioning. So there are 2 parts to diagnosis. So it's quite different from ordinary sadness.
So good follow-on question, and I see that even in my own family, there's a denial. You feel like that maybe someone is going through depression, but you are afraid to approach them to say that, and they are also not sure about it. So what are some of the signs of depression?
Well, often withdrawal from previous activities. As I said, lack of capacity to enjoy makes the person give up things previously they enjoyed. Somebody who stays in their room mostly, a teenager, for example, people who like to go to theater or read books are no longer doing that. Or they're mopey, they're more negative. So in the conversation, you can pick up some of that. And often family members are the one who will bring a family member who suffers from depression to our attention, saying that he or she doesn't see it, but I do. And often it's not the patient's fault either, because depression sort of makes you more foggy, you're in a funk, so you fail to realize that you're not making the bed, you're not changing your clothes, you're not taking showers as much, you often don't shave if you're a man, or you don't sort of, take care of your appearance and grooming, you're not reaching out, you don't make out as many phone calls to people and ask what's up, what's going on, let's do things. And so it can be very insidious. It's got a fog or miasma of depression, makes the patient somewhat insightless as to what's going on. So often family members should know about the symptoms.
So is it also due to, and could be due to some side effects of some medicines as well, that this kind of symptom could come?
Yes, of course. It's a medical condition and often caused by other medical conditions. For example, someone who is hypothyroid, they often have fatigue, sadness, loose hair, constipation, very tired, etc. And when they go to a psychiatrist, sometimes you check for thyroid and say that you're hypothyroid, that's causing you depression. Sometimes older high blood pressure medications or certain other cancer medications can cause sadness, lack of energy, depression, etc. Because after all, the condition is driven from your brain, the prefrontal cortex of your brain, that can be affected by drugs or other conditions or hormones.
So is it also hereditary, like some of the things which we talk about, heart disease and diabetes and all that? Or due to the life events which happen earlier in your age, like abuse or something?
Well, it's a combination of both, and it's what you're talking about is nature versus nurture. And there's plenty of evidence that mood disorders run in the family, as you might hear about clusters of suicide running in the family. Now you talk about early childhood experiences, abuse, neglect, losses, grief, etc. can predispose you to that, and there's a higher incidence of that. For example, Holocaust survivors, for example, had a higher incidence of depression. But there's also plenty of evidence that there's a genetic or heritable aspect to depression. And often when you collect the family history, you often hear that from people, that history of suicide, history of hospitalizations, etc., etc.
So you have to also have a clear, I guess, demarcation, or at least know, because as humans, we do go through emotions, and it could be temporary depression because someone died in the family and all that. So, but if it prolongs, then I guess it's a condition which needs to be addressed.
Right. Psychiatric literature is very cognizant of that and doesn't want to label people who are going through what's called adjustment disorder in response to a divorce or separation or a job loss or a grief related to a loved one's death, etc. So you want to be careful about not overdiagnosing it. But in general, the data that I've seen in my 35 to 40 years of professional life is that only 2 out of 5 people with depression are actually treated. So there can be both overdiagnosis and underdiagnosis. So I think that we have to be careful as to not lump day-to-day sadness or what they call lacrimum riri, in other words, this day-to-day sadness of life into that, and losses and job losses, divorce, etc.
So any statistics, meaning gender-based or even specific to South Asians or due to environment, in a war zone, you could have more depressed patients because of what's going on all the time?
Well, the data is such that, for example, in the South Asian community, we tend to think that depression is only caused by isolation or other conditions, etc. There is some evidence that there's higher incidence of depression among South Asians. If you look at, almost an epidemic of farmer suicide in India. I mean, it is related to circumstances, but there is some evidence that there's a higher incidence, and that's also interesting to note that there's higher incidence of heart disease, and often depressed patients have a higher incidence of heart disease or stroke. So it also puts you at risk for dying 3 or 4 years earlier from heart disease or stroke. So if you look at the South Asian population, there are a couple of things that are going on there. And war zones, etc., they can produce post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression goes with that. Yet when they look at the people of Calcutta, for example, they were no more unhappy because of their bad life, people in the slum, people who don't have electricity or hot water, etc. They were resilient. So there is a combination of what can happen to you that can cause depression, but at the same time, you have to have the heritability or the risk factor within you.
Okay, interesting. So what are some of the ways to treat depression?
Well, the first thing is to sort of identify and accept it, as I think that many times patients are reluctantly brought to me, and then they'll say that yes, they have been in a bit of a funk, so to speak. And often that recognition that help is available can be a major first step, and depression is a feeling state, and a lot of times talking to someone, a family member or a psychiatrist or a doctor, can give words to it, which makes it easier. As Shakespeare said, give sorrow words in Winter's Tale. And that is that's one of the first steps, and people often come back a week later and say that I'm already feeling somewhat better. And there are medications, psychotherapy. At the end of 6 months, many well-run psychotherapy like cognitive behavioral therapy were as good as antidepressant medications. And mind you, 80% of depression is treated by primary care doctors. So it's not only a very highly specialized thing. Only 20% of people are seen by people like me, people who have been hospitalized or on multiple medications, very complicated, etc. So this is something where primary care doctor gets involved first. So the families and primary care doctors.
But even psychologists.
Or psychologists, yes, of course. Yes.
So I think the biggest thing, and which is even I realized, was lack of information, and also always cared about the side effects of the medicines. I always hear different rumors and stories, and which might not be true because maybe the modern medicines has come across a long way.
Well, antidepressants, like any other medications, do have side effects. There are some minor and transient ones like nausea, headache. Nobody is bothered by that. A couple of things that people are bothered by is weight gain and sexual side effects. And that's why newer medications are being developed. So I do clinical trials, and we're constantly trying to tweak the molecules which do not cause sexual side effects or weight gain, etc. So in the long run, there could be some side effects like fatigue and impaired concentration, etc. However, bottom line is that work with your doctor about that. If I tell people that if you have side effects, that's not your problem, that's my problem. In other words, I'm not I'm not doing my job to relieve you of your symptoms without the bothersome side effects like weight gain or sexual side effects, etc. And all of that can be treated.
So what are some of the ways to detect and assess the severity of depression?
Well, I think that when it comes to the severity, the most severe aspect of it is, of course, suicidal behavior, etc. But apart from that, a child who is having failing grades or who's withdrawn, or capacity, sadness, bursting out in tears, fatigue, staying in bed, sleeping very long, or not sleeping at night. These can be quite disabling. So as any parent or family member, we should be aware of these symptoms. Plus, someone who is talking more negatively says things like, "What's the point?" and generally makes a lot more pessimistic statements.
So, and you mentioned it in the beginning of the interview, and it always comes up and unfortunately and sad that there have been lately a lot of mass killings in US, and every time when they go back and look at his record, they had some kind of a medical condition, depression or something, and always it hinges around releasing patient information and how do you get to it for gun controls and all that. Any update on that?
Well, the thing is, there are constant updates because the gun laws are basically they come out of the state legislature. So I think that having a federal policy addressing that and the medical records would be more useful. However, they're always there are always changes in the state legislature. However, checking those, in most states, you can check on the mental health background, and responsible gun shops, they do that, and they find the information and they do the right thing.
Okay.
But that information is available.
Yeah, and it was always frustrating to know, but hopefully they will come through and come up with some solution.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So where can people go for help? Websites and even professionals, and even in psychiatry, do you have specializations? Or where do they start? I mean, where do they can go?
Well, some common sites are WebMD, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, etc. American Psychiatric Association and American Psychological Associations. Psychology Today is a very common, popular magazine that often runs articles about depression, etc. So there's plenty of information available on because of the internet and web, etc. So regarding specializations, psychologists and social workers do the therapy. Psychiatrists are often the ones who prescribe the medication. Besides, our responsibility as MDs is also to first make the diagnosis, which is it another medical condition like anemia, thyroid condition, a brain tumor, which can first present as depression, or a pancreatic cancer that can sometimes present as depression. So, so basically, you have to have a diagnosis and then decide whether you're going to use medications or whether you're going to use therapy, or often what achieves best result is a combination of therapy and medication.
So, you know, most of the time when the patient or the person who is going through this phase talks to their friends or family, how can they help? How can they identify that he or she needs help?
Well, first thing is to sort of continue that dialogue, because depression festers in isolation. And as I was saying earlier, give sorrow words. Sometimes, you know, talking to a friend or family member, etc., can also give you a sense of whether the illness is progressive. Because one of the natural course of this illness is that it's progressive. And often when you talk to a person repeatedly, you'll find that, look, last week it wasn't so bad, or 3 weeks ago you were better. Now it seems that things are getting worse and worse. And that is another sign that a professional you know, should be involved.
So, well, we have to conclude our you know, this episode. It was really interesting discussion, an important discussion. Any last minute advice to the audience you want to give?
I would just say that it's a very common condition, and family members and friends should be aware of that. And if there's any problem that you notice, talk to your primary care doctors, and involve more family members, and not be judgmental, because people fear that they're going to be judged if they're present as weak or depressed.
Very good advice. Thank you very much. I'll
Thank
end
you.
with 2 quotes. Start by doing what's necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly you're doing impossible. St. Francis of Assisi. And the second one is, things are neither good or bad, but thinking makes it so. William Shakespeare. Like I always say, life is short, have fun, and no regrets. Thank you.
Thank you.